When Elvis passed away, many people came to Graceland to say goodbye. It was very hot outside, and over 30,000 fans visited. Some needed medical help. Priscilla, Elvis's wife, spent time in her grandmother's room and with her dog, Dodger. That night, Priscilla and Lisa said their private goodbyes to Elvis. They put a special bracelet on his wrist as a reminder of their love. The funeral was held the next morning in the living room at Graceland. Priscilla and Lisa told Elvis, who was a husband and father, "We'll miss you." The living room was changed to have rows of chairs for people to sit. Famous people like James Brown, George Hamilton, Chet Atkins, Sammy Davis Jr., and Anne Margaret came to the funeral. Anne Margaret used to compete with Priscilla to marry Elvis, but at the funeral, they felt sadness together. Anne Margaret said Elvis was a good man, kind, respectful, and a gentleman. She also said he was a part of her life that would never go away, and she was lucky to have such a friend and soulmate. Elvis had many girlfriends, and they all came to the funeral to mourn together. They included Priscilla, Anne Margaret, Ginger Alden, Linda Thompson, Mindy Miller, and Kathy Westmoreland. They all loved Elvis and were sad about his passing. Vernon, Elvis's dad, chose a man named Reverend Rex Humbard to lead the funeral. He talked about how kind Elvis was and how close he was with his dad. Everyone was emotional, and the music, including some of Elvis's favorite gospel songs, made people cry. One of Elvis's ex-girlfriends, Kathy Westmoreland, sang a song called Heavenly Father. Another emotional moment came when James Blackwood sang, "How Great Thou Art." Many people remembered that he also sang at Elvis's mom's funeral. Other singers like Jake Hess, J.D. Sumner, and the Stamps Quartet performed too. At the end of the funeral, Elvis was carried out of his home, Graceland, by 9 strong men. They took him to a special building in a cemetery where his mom was buried too. The next day, more than 50,000 fans came to the cemetery to say goodbye to Elvis. When Elvis died, he didn't have as much money as people thought. Lamar Fike said Elvis had spent a lot and was in a tough situation. The Colonel, who helped manage Elvis's career, quickly made a plan to keep making money from Elvis's image and products. He gave Vernon, Elvis's dad, a contract to continue working with him. Even though the Colonel's words were a bit cold, he wanted to make sure Elvis's family was taken care of. Vernon, like he did in other difficult times, trusted that things would work out according to God's plan. He wished Elvis could have lived forever, but understood that his early death was part of that plan. In October 1977, after Elvis passed away, they had to move his grave to a safer place because of problems with vandalism and potential grave robbers. It was easier to protect his grave at Graceland, where some of his friends were still working as security. Elvis and his mom, Gladys, were moved to a place called the Meditation Garden near Graceland. Only close family members were there for the small ceremony. The Meditation Garden became Elvis's final resting place. Elvis's grandma, Vernon, his dad, and Aunt Delta lived at Graceland until they passed away. Vernon didn't get better and died from heart problems in 1979, 2 years after Elvis's last concert. Grandma Minnie Mae, also known as Dodger, died in 1980 after grieving for both her son and grandson. Vernon, Minnie Mae, Elvis, and Gladys were all buried in the Meditation Garden. Aunt Delta lived at Graceland until her death in 1993. When Elvis passed away, many of the people who worked with him had a hard time. Some had other jobs they could do, but others had to start over. They all missed Elvis a lot and felt lost without him. Lamar Fike, who had been with Elvis since the beginning, said that Elvis's death changed everyone's life. Even though Lamar had a career in Nashville, he couldn't remember a time when his life wasn't about Elvis. After Elvis died, Vernon, his father, still acted greedy. He didn't give Billy Smith, his cousin, a trailer and furniture that Elvis had bought for him. Vernon said it would be in Billy's name, but he changed his mind after Elvis died. Billy felt angry towards Vernon and decided to move to Mississippi with his family. They had nothing, and going back to a normal life was very difficult for them. Dr. Nick was a friend of Elvis and took care of him when he was sick. After Elvis died, Dr. Nick faced big problems because of the way he gave medicine to Elvis and others. He was accused of giving too many drugs to patients, including Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis. The jury said he wasn't guilty because they thought he was trying to help his patients. But later, in 1993, the people who control doctors in Tennessee took away his license to practice medicine. They said he had been giving too many drugs for a long time. Dr. Nick said he was only trying to help patients who were in pain. Billy Smith, a friend of Elvis, thought Dr. Nick was a good doctor and believed he cared about his patients. Billy also thought that two other doctors, Dr. Gainham and Dr. Shapiro, should have been in trouble too because they gave Elvis lots of medicine at once. Billy testified for Dr. Nick's defense, saying that Dr. Nick was different because he kept most of the medicine with him instead of giving it all to Elvis at once. Dr. Nick, Elvis's doctor, wrote a lot of prescriptions for him in 1977, more than 10,000 doses of different medicines. Some people said he did a good job trying to help Elvis, even though it was hard to control what Elvis wanted. Dr. Nick also said he had so many doses because he needed them for all the people in Elvis's group, about 150 people. They were all part of Team Presley and worked late at night just like Elvis. Dr. Forrest Tennant, who knows a lot about this, thinks Elvis was trying to ease his pain with the medicine. He would be called a fibromyalgia patient today, and back then, there wasn't any special way to treat pain. Dr. Nick, Elvis's doctor, was the only one who really tried to understand and help with his health problems. Other doctors just gave him medicine. Dr. Nick's son, Dean, remembers how much his dad cared and how he would stay up late thinking about what to do to help Elvis. If Dr. Nick had better tools like an MRI machine, things might have been better. Dean says his dad was doing pain management before it was even a thing. After Elvis died, some people started guessing what caused it. The doctor said it was a problem with his heart called cardiac arrhythmia. This is a common cause of death, but people wanted to know what made his heart stop working. It's strange that the doctor announced the cause of death before the full autopsy was done. A man named Dan Warlick, who helped with the autopsy, didn't find any signs of drug use. He didn't see any needle marks from using drugs through a vein, and there was no sign that Elvis had been using cocaine a lot. When Elvis passed away, his doctor said his organs were bigger than usual. His spleen was much heavier than normal, and his liver was very big too. His heart was larger than it should be and looked unhealthy. He had a condition called atherosclerosis, which means plaque was building up in some of his arteries. This was moderate in his kidneys, which could have caused kidney problems. Before he died, Elvis was close to needing a treatment called dialysis because of this. The big heart and plaque buildup might have been signs of high blood pressure and heart failure. When they looked at Elvis's body after he passed away, they found a big problem with his colon. It was much bigger and longer than usual, about 5 inches wide in some places and 9 feet long. This was due to a condition called megacolon that Elvis had for a long time. There was a blockage in his colon, and it was filled with hard-to-remove waste. This waste had a substance called barium in it, which he had taken during a doctor's visit for x-rays a few months before. The doctors at the autopsy thought this problem might be related to Elvis's drug use, but his longtime doctor, Dr. Nick, said it was actually a genetic issue that Elvis had since birth. The doctors didn't know this at the time, and they thought his constipation was caused by taking too many drugs. Now, we know that it was a problem he was born with and not related to his drug use. During Elvis's autopsy, 2 important findings were overlooked or not fully understood. One showed signs of a condition called hypogammaglobulinemia, which made it hard for Elvis to fight infections. The second finding was alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, a genetic condition that can affect the lungs and liver. At the time, people thought Elvis just carried the gene, but now we know it can cause serious health problems. A study from 2005 showed that people with this condition can have lung and liver diseases, and Elvis had both. Even though there's some risk with this condition, it was quickly dismissed during the autopsy and not taken seriously by many people. We may never know the full impact of Elvis's inherited alpha-1 condition, but it's sad how easily it was ignored. People talked a lot about the test results after Elvis died. 2 different labs gave different answers. One lab in California said they found 10 drugs in Elvis's body and thought that using many drugs together caused his death. This is called polypharmacy, which isn't always because of drug addiction. The average older person takes more than 5 medicines, and it's not uncommon for nursing home residents to take 7. Another lab in Utah found 11 drugs in Elvis's system and believed they were all for medical treatment. They didn't think the drugs caused his death by interacting with each other. The director of the Utah lab said Elvis needed the drugs for his health problems. The doctor who did the autopsy agreed, saying that even without the drugs, Elvis would have died. When people found out about Elvis using a lot of prescription drugs, they became curious. Not many knew about his health problems like his megacolon or high blood pressure. In 1979, a TV show called The Elvis Cover-Up talked about this. The show accused a hospital administrator of not sharing information about Elvis's autopsy. But viewers didn't learn that the autopsy was requested by Elvis's family and was private. Only the family can decide to share it. Because of this show, some people thought there was a cover-up involving the hospital. But the full story wasn't shared on the show. A reporter named Rivera talked to a doctor who was there when Elvis's autopsy happened. This doctor took out Elvis's colon and thought it was because of drugs. But later, on camera, he said Elvis died because of taking many medicines at once, not just drugs. The doctor didn't know that Elvis had been having trouble going to the bathroom for a long time, even before he started taking prescription medicine. It was the job of the investigative journalists to find this information out. When the 2020 team looked into Elvis's death, they didn't ask about his or his family's health history. If they had, they might have found other reasons for his health problems, not just the colon issue they focused on. The doctors at the autopsy could have made better guesses if they knew about Elvis's family's health problems. For example, if they knew Elvis's mom died young because of heart and liver issues, or that his uncles had similar health problems, would they have seen a pattern? Maybe they would have thought more about heart problems causing Elvis's death instead of just a drug overdose. Knowing about his uncles and Uncle Johnny's health issues might have changed how people talked about Elvis's death. When people saw the list of drugs in Elvis's body on TV, they just called him a drug addict without explaining the reasons. A doctor, Dr. Dan Brookoff, said that one drug, Donatol, which has phenobarbital in it, was for a bowel problem. But they didn't say that some of the drugs were for sleeping and that Elvis's body could get used to them over time. The news only talked about one lab's results that said too many drugs caused Elvis's death, but they didn't mention another lab's findings that said all the drugs were for medical reasons and in safe amounts. They also didn't talk about Elvis's health problems. To make the story more believable, the program talked to people who were in Elvis's mansion when he died. However, over the years, some of these people changed their stories, which wasn't known in 1979. Later, when these inconsistencies were found, it turned into more of a sensational story, like another famous show about Al Capone's vaults. In the end, Geraldo Rivera's special about Elvis, The Elvis Cover-Up, said that people want to keep good memories of Elvis, but the truth should be known. The public deserves to know if they were deceived and to make their own decisions about his death. No matter what the truth is about his death, Elvis's incredible contributions during his life will never be forgotten. He was a unique person, a phenomenon, and the king of rock and roll. A TV show called 2020 changed how people in America saw Elvis Presley. It didn't tell the whole story about how he died, which made people see him in a bad light. Many people watched the show, and some even forgot about the good things Elvis did for music and culture. The show focused on Elvis taking too many pills and dying because of it. People who knew Elvis were confused about his death and didn't know all the details about his health problems. They didn't understand his family's health history or how it affected him. One person said Elvis just suffocated, but he didn't have any real reason to believe that. Cousin Billy Smith said that too much codeine could have caused Elvis's death. Elvis knew he was allergic to it, but he still took it. Linda Thompson noticed it made him itch, and even Dr. Nick, who gave it to him, knew about the itching. However, Elvis took codeine several times and didn't die from it. There are 2 prescriptions for codeine written for Elvis in 1967 by a doctor named W.B. Burrow. During Elvis's autopsy, they checked for swelling in his throat to see if he had an allergic reaction to drugs, but there was none. So, the idea that he died because of his known allergy to codeine isn't true. It's also not true that Elvis died from taking too much codeine. Dr. Nick, who was an important person in Elvis's life, said that a codeine overdose doesn't cause a sudden death, but a slow one. Elvis died suddenly, and Dr. Tennant, another expert, agreed that it wasn't a codeine overdose. There was no fluid in Elvis's lungs, which would have happened if he died from a codeine overdose. The codeine wasn't even prescribed by Dr. Nick. It was given to Elvis by his dentist the day before he passed away. Before Elvis died, a doctor named Dr. Nick gave him some medicine packs. These packs had a certain amount of medicine for things like sleep, his colon, or blood pressure. They weren't just for making him happy or anything like that. Elvis had taken these medicines before, and they were normal for him. He took the same medicines every day and was alive, so the mix of medicines he had that day wasn't what caused him to die. Dr. Nick explained that the combination of medicines at those levels wasn't what killed him on that specific day. In 1994, 17 years after Elvis died, the health department in Tennessee asked a doctor named Dr. Joseph Davis to check if another doctor, Dr. Jerry Francisco, had been dishonest about how Elvis died. If he was, it would be a big problem. Dr. Davis had worked on investigating the deaths of famous people like John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. using new knowledge from the past 20 years. Dr. Davis said that Elvis really did die from a heart attack and that Dr. Francisco didn't lie on the death certificate. Dr. Davis explained that if Elvis had taken too many drugs, he would have fallen asleep and tried to get help, but it takes a long time to die from drugs. Instead, everything points to a sudden, serious heart attack. There's no proof that he died from drugs. A group of doctors who study poisoning also looked at the report. Dr. Kevin S. Meridian, a doctor who worked at a hospital in Memphis, said that it's very unlikely for someone to die from heart problems because of the drugs found in Elvis's system. These drugs were more like sleeping pills and would make you very tired and sleepy. They don't usually cause heart problems or sudden death. So, these experts also said that Elvis's death was because of a heart problem followed by a quick end. No one has looked into whether genetic diseases might have played a part in Elvis's life or death. There hasn't been a study to check if it could be the reason he passed away. It's an interesting idea, but people usually focus more on his drug problems. However, a doctor who studied Elvis's death closely thinks it's possible that a genetic disease caused it. Before this, no one knew that some of Elvis's relatives had heart attacks by the age of 50. In 2014, a doctor named Dr. Richard Shepard examined Elvis's case. He's very experienced and has worked on many famous autopsies. He found that Elvis was in poor health and his heart was very big, likely due to high blood pressure for a long time. This shows how serious the situation was and how likely it was that he would have a heart problem. A doctor explained that a big liver can mean it's not working properly. Elvis's liver was very large, even though it didn't look sick. There could be a few reasons for this, like taking too many medicines, eating unhealthy food, and having high cholesterol. But there's another possibility. If his heart wasn't working well, blood could get backed up and make his liver swell. Gladys, Elvis's mom, had problems with her liver and heart at the same time. She went to the hospital because of liver issues, but she ended up dying from a heart attack. It's possible that something similar could have happened to Elvis. A writer named Anthony William explains that the liver and heart are closely connected. When the liver is healthy, it helps the heart work well. But if the liver is not working properly, it can cause heart problems. Elvis's mom and dad both had heart issues, and it seems like there was a problem between the liver and heart in both of them. This could have been a concern for Elvis as well, since heart trouble ran in his family. A doctor named Dr. Shepard looked at the list of 9 drugs in Elvis's body. 4 of them were used to help people sleep, and he took a lot of them because he built up a tolerance. This means his body got used to the medicine and needed more to work. Elvis had trouble sleeping since around 1957, and after so many years, he needed even more medicine to sleep. There were also 2 drugs for anxiety and depression, which can happen when someone can't sleep well. Another medicine was for his stomach. Dr. Shepard said that none of the drugs by themselves could have caused Elvis's death. The only dangerous one was Demerol, but it was only found in his liver, not his bloodstream. This means he didn't take it in the last day of his life, so it didn't cause his death. Dr. Nick, another doctor, found it funny to think that all the sleep medicine could have killed Elvis because it didn't even make him sleepy when he died. When Dr. Shepard looked at Elvis's health, he was surprised by the size of Elvis's colon. He couldn't believe Elvis had been in pain for several days because of it. Dr. Shepard was trying to find out why Elvis's heart stopped beating. He thought about how Elvis took a few steps away from the toilet, which was confirmed by an investigator named Dan Warlick. Dr. Shepard believed this was important because if Elvis had overdosed, he would have passed out, but he stood up and tried to get help. This made Dr. Shepard think that Elvis's problem was with his heart, not from an overdose. People have been guessing what caused Elvis's heart problem, but doctors now think it was something called the Valsalva maneuver. This happens when you put pressure on your belly and chest, like when you try really hard to poop or push during childbirth. In Elvis's case, he was constipated and straining a lot to go to the bathroom. This increased pressure made it harder for his heart to get the blood it needed, and it caused his heart to fail. He collapsed and died because of it. Also, Elvis was taking medicine for high blood pressure, and this, along with the extra effort he put into going to the bathroom before a tour, might have made his heart slow down too much. In 1991, Dan Warlick shared an idea called the Valsalva maneuver theory about Elvis Presley's death. Some people thought it was strange and didn't believe it. Warlick said that Elvis was in so much pain trying to go to the bathroom that he accidentally increased the pressure in his belly. This pressure was stronger than his blood pressure, which made it hard for his heart to pump blood. He explained that this could have caused damage to a big blood vessel and stopped his heart. It would have felt like a heart attack and made it hard for him to breathe. Even though it's not a pretty explanation, it might be the most likely reason for Elvis's death. Later on, a famous doctor agreed that Warlick's idea was probably correct and the cause of the heart problem that led to Elvis's death. Some people think that Elvis's big belly was just from taking too many medicines, but that's not true. He had a condition called Hirschsprung's, even though it was never officially diagnosed. His heart and liver weren't working properly, which made it hard for him to go to the bathroom. Investigator Dan Warlick said, Elvis Presley did not die from too many drugs. He had health problems that were partly because of his genes. The story about drugs is more exciting, but it's not the real reason. Over the years, people have learned more about Elvis's autopsy report. They've moved away from the dramatic ideas and looked at real evidence. One important part of understanding his death is his large colon, which acted like a storage place for bacteria and toxins. Elvis had trouble fighting infections, so his body couldn't handle the toxins building up in his colon from waste. This waste needs to be removed quickly to avoid problems. If the colon is very toxic, it can cause organ failure at any time. Many doctors have said that Elvis was like a walking time bomb because of all the health issues he had, and he could have died at any moment. Elvis didn't like drugs or drinking and didn't want people to remember him as a drug addict. He cared about his family and fans and didn't want them to think he caused his own problems. He knew his fans helped him have a great life, so he never wanted to let them down. Even when he was very sick, he would still perform for his fans because he didn't want to disappoint them. He really loved his fans. A friend, George Klein, said that Elvis was just like any other person and would still perform even when he was feeling very sick.